You know, I'll say anything, as you know already.
I'll start. I read the Sunday Review and the Chronicle, and I just thought, oh my God, what book is this? And I got to that cabin scene, oh my God, I read it out loud. I got to read this book.
Oh, great, thank you.
It really, I love the whole aspect of family.
Cool.
And there's no perfect family. At least I'd like to tell myself that.
Yeah, well,
I'm
mine
glad to
hasn't been
hear
perfect.
things like this.
Yeah,
actually.
my in-laws, of course, are perfect. But my family.
So I think you did a good job. I don't really have a question.
Cool, thank you so much. I
But
appreciate it.
just a part of me that just wants to nominate this for our book club just for the sake of
thanks.
doing it.
There'll be plenty to discuss. Thanks.
It struck me that you said you wrote the book in about 5.5 months, and it was published in almost the same form that you wrote it in. So I'm wondering if you could talk about what kind of editing went on as you were writing, and how you edit, when you edit.
Yeah, what I do is I write every day for 2 hours. The first hour, I'm reading the previous pages, like the previous 20 pages or so. The second hour, I write my new 2 pages. In the case of this novel, or right now I'm doing 1 page. I'm a little slower on the current one. And the 2 pages comes pretty quickly in just little flashes during that hour. And in between, I just keep going back and rereading the previous pages. And I have no idea what's going to happen. Each day, I have this feeling that maybe I'll never write again, that there is no next page to the novel. But if I just... It's all about momentum. It's about being there 7 days a week and never taking a break from it. About it being every morning without interruptions of other stuff first. And when I read through those 20 pages, it does bring me back to this place where the next 2 pages happen. And they're in these kind of bursts. They get sort of exciting. And I just realized in the fall when I was on tour with my last book, I think it was, that at the end of my writing session each day, I'm actually kind of hyperventilating because I think I'm pushing toward a more significant moment. I want a little piece of crazy every 2 pages, basically. I hope to offer you that. And so I realized at the end I'm kind of hyperventilating. I'm like, in my writing, it's probably not pretty. I'm alone in the room, luckily. There's no one who sees this. But it's a strange thing of an hour of reading and having my mind go all over the place. And it was just like when I used to meditate. Mind goes off 16 directions, try to just kind of bring it back. But then after an hour of that, I can actually add to it. And then that 20 pages those pages will now get read for the next 10 days. I'll still be going back to them. They'll be included in the 20 pages. And so I might change a word here or there, but I rarely do actually. I mean, I almost never. It's pretty much, it really is published the way it just comes out in those little fits. That's pretty much it. In a 65,000 word book, I'll go through with line edits at the end and maybe cut 1,000 words. I can't remember, maybe it was 2,000 words, but just by cutting out ugly little grammatical words, like, this, that, and, or, I, he, she, like just cutting those little things. Try to eliminate those as much as possible. I study Old English and been reading Beowulf each day, translating it from Old English, from our language the way it was 1,000 years ago. And it's so great the way they think. They just take the whole world in content chunks. Like Thead Kuning and Thrym Yfrun and Hutha Eithlingas, Ellen Fremedon. It's all, the meter is like stress, 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 stress. And they're just chunks of content. There's very little grammar in between that organizes it. And I've been heading more and more that way in my books, where I just kind of like the chunks of content. And so I use a lot of sentence fragments that don't have the verbs. I try to cut out the grammatical morphemes as much as possible. I've written a book a year for 4 years now, where they've all been 5.5 months. So it was a nonfiction book about a school shooting that came out in October. I wrote that in, 2009? Or no, 2008. And then 2009 I wrote Caribou Island, which is 5.5 months again. Actually, the shooter book was 7 weeks, because I just wanted to get it out of my head. It was such an ugly story. But the novels are all 5.5 months. Caribou Island, and then Dirt in 2010. Goat Mountain in 2011, which will come out next year. And then the one I'm writing now, I'm slowing down a bit. It's a very strange one. It's set 3,200 years ago, so I have to look stuff up, and it slows me down. But it's really fun, and really my editor's wonderful in the U.S. Gail Winston at HarperCollins. She lets me do what I want to do. And she bought this next book, Goat Mountain, that comes out next year, with no title, description, or any pages or anything. She just said it'll take the next. And she's publishing it as is. My agents had no comments for revision, and she had no comments for revision. And it's just getting published exactly the way it is. This one, I added 2 or 3 paragraphs she asked for to make connections where she thought a reader might get lost. And in Caribou Island, I added 7 or 8 paragraphs of background material about the main character, which my editor asked for. So it's been really strange to have it work out there. Hey, Nick. So I almost led to the early death of young Nick on a sailboat in several cases, actually. He almost died twice. It's very nice of you to come around, to come here. I realize it's a dangerous kind of proposal there. Yeah, so it's been really fun, that kind of writing. I don't think it'll last forever like that. I think it happened because Dirt is based on the second short story I ever wrote, and the next one, Goat Mountain, is based on the first short story I ever wrote. Mm-hmm. So these were waiting 20 years where I couldn't figure out how to write them before, and they'd been kind of gestating for a long time. So it makes sense that I could write them quickly. Mm-hmm. In my first book, Legend of Suicide, I worked on for 10 years and threw everything away for the 10 years. And then what's kept in the book, I wrote really quickly at the end. That novel that's at the end, I wrote half of it in 17 days. So it's everything I've ever published, I've written quickly. I don't have an example except my sailing memoir, A Mile Down. I wrote it quickly, but too long, and then I took forever to chop it all down to something shorter. So that was a huge revision process where there's only about a third left of the book of what was there at one point. Yeah?
So I read your last book, and
Caribou Island or the school shooter?
Yes, Caribou Island.
Uh-huh.
And I really liked it right up until the end, which really caught me by surprise.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it was like a bit of a stretch.
Uh-huh.
Now, I don't like happy endings. Our book club met just last night and read a book that I really criticized heavily because it had a bunch of, all the main characters were like perfect people with no flaws. Right. And of course it's one of those and they all lived happily ever after endings, and I hate that.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with top endings, but I still thought it was a bit of a stretch. So I was wondering if you could just comment whether
I actually didn't want that ending. I was really trying to avoid it. And the thing is, there's a true story in the past in my family. When I was 12 years old, my stepmother lost her parents to a murder-suicide. Her mother shot her husband, then shot herself, because he had told her that the last 15 years of marriage was a lie. He'd been having an affair, and he's moving on without her. She planned to commit suicide, and she wrote notes to everyone, including to him. But then in the end, she took him out before killing herself. And there was a kind of, what happens in the book is different than that, but there was a kind of magnetic force from that. Like, they were in California, I don't really remember them, the characters are different, the book's set in Alaska, really everything that happens, like they never built a cabin or anything. But the idea that a woman could get to the point of wanting to kill her husband, that was something I wanted to try to understand. Since then, I've been in many countries where women from cities and towns like all over the place have told me that it's not that hard to imagine, actually. It's not hard to imagine how a woman would want to kill her husband. So apparently it was not a difficult task I had set out in front of me. But that's what I was trying to get. So yeah, the true story in my family's past had this kind of, tractor beam effect. And I couldn't get away from that ending. So again, it's not what happened in real life, and there's no guns in the book, and, but it has a resemblance. But yeah, I wasn't happy. I actually wrote an alternative ending for it because I didn't want it to go there. I didn't want that ending to happen. And one of my editors wanted a different ending too. But in the end, I feel like a book is what it is. Now, they're published the way they come out in the first draft. It doesn't mean they're without flaws, or that they couldn't have been a better book in some way, like with a different ending or something. But I kind of like the idea that they just are what they are, that they're one piece. It's every day, 7 days a week for the 5.5 months, and there's a lot of unconscious pattern in there. It takes me a couple of years to find out, through all the interviews I do, to find out what I've written. There are a lot of smart journalists who figure out the book better than I do. And so I find out what I've written. And I figure if I went in and made a lot of changes, I would actually cut a lot of those unconscious ties that I don't see yet. And so I like it being one piece. Plus, I can't do anything else. I mean, theoretically, I'd like to go back and polish and make a better book. But the books, as soon as I finish the first draft, it grows a kind of hard candy shell on it that I can't crack open anymore. It's just, I can't add a scene anymore. I can't imagine adding a scene. So it's just done. Yeah, but yeah, I wish it had worked out differently too. What I really want is to write triumphant endings. I really, I'd like to sell a lot of copies in the U.S. and have everyone be like, I just loved reading your book, and I felt so good at the end. I've never had anyone say that to me, and I'd really like to have someone say that. So I'm thinking someday I could write a book about class despair, like someone really beaten up who triumphs in the end. I could believe in that kind of happy story. Like in the movie, like Cinderella Man, like the boxer held down. I could believe in something like that, but I can't seem to find the story. So. There was a woman in France, a bookseller, who said that her mother had threatened to kill herself, like her whole life. She'd always had this threat over her head that her mother was going to kill herself. And she read Legend of Suicide, and after reading it, she decided to hell with it. If she wants to do it, she can. I'm not going to let it wreck my life anymore. And so she sold 1,300 copies of that book to everyone who came in the door had to buy a copy. And that was the closest I've come to a triumphant feeling about something that led to a positive change in someone's life. And that's it. Any other questions? Comments? Reservations?
Perhaps time to sign books.
Cool. Great. Well, thanks a lot for coming. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming.